China is turning the climate crisis into an advantage in its competition with the United States, but the U.S. still has a window of opportunity to keep up and stay ahead. Erin Sikorsky is the director of the Center for Climate and Security. She previously served on the National Intelligence Council. Erin, welcome back to the program. Nice to see you.
Thanks so much for having me.
You know, DOD always talks about China as the pacing threat. You say that climate change should be the shaping threat. What do you mean by that?
Sure. Climate change is going to shape the landscape in which our military has to operate. So this means not only on the battlefield with extreme temperatures, extreme weather, but also in terms of how our adversaries and competitors behave. And that's what we're seeing with China right now, is climate change is not only affecting them internally, but also affecting where they compete, how they reach out to other countries, and really driving and shaping how they interact in the world stage.
You know, you say that China's not only taking climate change into account, but taking advantage of it. In what way?
So there are two different ways that we primarily see China doing this. One is by leveraging it with countries that are vulnerable to climate effects to try and gain their support. And we've seen this in the Pacific Islands, where China has reached out to say, we'll help you deal with climate change shocks. And then those countries perhaps change their position on Taiwan, other issues that China cares about. The other way we've seen it is in competition for critical minerals, things you need for renewable energy and the energy transition. China is trying to take the lead there and really compete economically and make sure they control those minerals going forward.
You also say that the United States really doesn't have a climate lens to its strategic security policy towards China. Explain that a little bit more and what your recommendations would be so that the U.S. isn't caught off guard.
Sure. So to be fair, I think they're actually building a climate lens right now as they build the National Defense Strategy, and the reports that the Defense Department released a few weeks ago are moving in that direction. And what this means is, when thinking about how China will face climate risks, understanding what those risks are, being able to bring the science to our strategic planning and understanding, and finding areas in which we can compete, reaching to allies and partners, showing them that we can support them in managing climate risks. I think President Biden's statement at the meeting in Glasgow earlier this week was important when he called out China for not being there. That shows that we are leading, and they need to step up as well.
You mentioned allies and partners. What's the best way for the U.S. to work together with them so that we can confront China's, the risks that we might face together?
Sure. I think one thing we can do is share the technology and the tools that we have that we're developing to manage climate risks to our own military installations and bases. And that's something the Pentagon has said they will do. They've built a tool to measure those risks. They're going to share it with partners like South Korea, Japan. I think that's a really good first step. I think there's also work we can do on renewable energy, helping other countries finance and think through how they move to clean energy, and being the partner of first choice there for those countries.
You mentioned in your article that there are areas that we can collaborate and cooperate with China. That's interesting. How do we do that?
Sure, and absolutely it'll be a challenge, but I think you can look to some examples from the Cold War where we collaborated or we worked with Russia to share data and information on certain topics that were of mutual concern. I think we should look for opportunities for scientific collaboration, data sharing, to reduce the risks of miscalculation, misunderstanding, and build a shared picture of climate risks in the Indo-Pacific and other places.
You mentioned Russia. So do these recommendations apply to Russia as well?
I think Russia's a little bit of a different beast than China, but I do think it's really important for the U.S. to understand how climate change will shape risks in Russia, shape the Arctic, for example, and how Russia's trying to take advantage there of melting ice to have access to minerals, access to shipping lanes. That absolutely has to be part of the U.S. strategy in that part of the world, is the climate piece as well.
What about taking into account China's unique vulnerabilities to climate change? How does the U.S. do that?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely critical. You know, China has millions of people living in coastal communities that are threatened by sea level rise. They have food security issues related to climate. And so when the U.S. is assessing Chinese plans and strategies and decision making, we need to understand how those climate shocks internally that could create instability in China as well are understood and taken into account.
What would be your last recommendation for the Pentagon, particularly when it comes to dealing with the effects of climate change?
I think the most important thing is that you need to mainstream the climate issue across all aspects of the work there. It can't be siloed off in one office that manages climate alone, but instead all of the regional COCOMs have to be able to bring that climate lens to their work. You need to have a climate smart workforce, and I know the Pentagon's working on that, and it's really exciting to see.
All right. Well, Erin, thanks very much. We'll see what happens.
Great. Thank you.